Arret dreamed. A tentacle snaked along the wall, oozing blood from its pus-crusted octopus suckers. Arret stared, mouth extending in nameless horror as it approached, reaching the corner of his bed and slipping beneath the covers. He could feel something wet and stinging against his ankles, groping up his thigh, tighter, tighter until it was pain, agonizing pain. His flesh fusing, the burning, iron-wrought stench, and laughter. Laughter rising inside his head in booming pulses of incoherent noise that slipped out his eyes in broken, haggard sobs. Arret woke with a start, old eyes straining to pierce the darkness of the underdecks. He tried to ignore the scratching whispers on the back of his mind, the mutterings in dead languages tantalizingly close to modern Gothic. He shut his eyes against the monstrous shadows formed on the wall by a single candlelight. Slimy, gnashing things that grasped towards him. A small sob caught at the edge of his throat. Steadying his breath, Arret rose from the bed, the gantry freezing against the parchment-thin skin of his feet. In the distance, he heard the boom of bolt fire. He instinctively made the sign of the Aquila, frowning as he tiptoed from his cot towards the central shrine. The central hollow statue bathed him in pale blue light. Diocles had said that it belonged to the Age of Apostasy, an artist's faltering depiction of the god-emperor of humankind. The hollow emperor was a tall, imposing figure, his face concealed by a large cowl that gave only the impression of an aquiline nose. Ethereal power armor lined with minuscule prayers shone with a halo's light. Diocles had said it looked nothing like God, but that it captured something of his essence. The ancient hollow statue was the centerpiece of the temple, but far from its only relic. Arched alcoves gathered the bones of saints, grinning skeletal faces, blood-stoned femurs, all casting flickering shadows and consecrated candles against ecclesiarchal silk. Statuettes stood on velveted podiums, eyes darkened by the lip of their hoods, standing over heavy spined tombs and half-burnt purity seals. Arret kneeled on a prayer mat, prostrating himself before the hollow statues. He muttered prayers. His body trembled. He heard Sarah approach before she spoke, the familiar whir of her grav chair guttering on the frigid air.
"Can't sleep, Brother Arret?"
"No. Dark dreams." He rose to face her, the ghost of a smile haunting his lips. She was much younger than him, her dark skin shining with undeniable vigor. Arret liked to watch the shape of her lips as she spoke, never softly, always brazen. Both her legs were amputated above the knee, always drawing Arret's jealous gaze. He had no such scars, no proof of his faith.
"It is the warp,"
Sarah declared.
"We are navigated blindly by the lost and the damned."
"Yes."
"It makes you wonder."
"It does."
"Come now, Arret."
Arret blinked. He had grown used to these warp-ridden conversations, plagued with misunderstanding, rampant falsehoods, even hallucinations. He had no faith in what she was saying, no proof that she was even saying them, that she was even here in the room before him.
"We have become complicit,"
Sarah said.
"He has made us complicit."
"We are the candle."
"The use of fire is to burn heretics and traitors, not to weakly illuminate their sin."
"We keep the faith."
"What is faith without action?"
"I act," Arret replied, his voice frail. "I pray."
"This ship is thick with prayers, Arret. That's part of the problem."
Arret shook his head. "This isn't real," he decided. "You are a tormentor of the warp."
"I am what remains of your conscience."
"Enough!" Arret drew the knife at his belt, holding it against Sarah's throat. It was a blunt instrument, cutlery, not a weapon, but it still drew dots of blood upon her skin. She swallowed, but smiled. Arret thought it an evil smile.
"You are fraying, brother. You are fraying badly."
Arret let the knife fall to the ground, collapsing to his knees.
"Even in this you are impotent. A failure. Have you ever satisfied a woman?
Aret moaned in misery. When he looked up, there was no sign of Sara or a grav chair. He was alone, tormented by the warp. He was not even sure if Sara had ever existed. It was hard to think. There were voices inside his head, overlapping with his own, finishing his silent sentences with blasphemous suggestions.
Non temebo quia imperator mecum est, he prayed. Quia imperator mecum est?
Acolyte. Aret groaned in relief as he felt Diocles' gauntlet on his shoulder. He had no real sense of how long a time had passed, but with the Astartes' presence, the whispers in his head fell silent and the shadows on the floor faded to nothing. Aret allowed himself to be pulled into an embrace, comforted by the beating of the word-bearers' hearts.
The warp! The warp!
I know, Aret. My brothers say that it stirs in anticipation of the despoiler himself, that the God Emperor's rule may be finally coming to an end. They gloat and prattle that chaos is ascendant, and that the Imperium is being torn asunder to the laughter of thirsting gods.
I feel it. I feel it.
No, Acolyte. The despoiler and his demonic patrons are but dim approximations of power. They throw their petty stones, and they may wound his Imperium, but it shall forever endure while his humanity keeps faith.
Aret drew back, taking Diocles in. The Astartes had removed his helmet, his dark, mournful eyes seeming tired and old. When he smiled, there were lines in his skin like fissures in cracked marble.
You are injured,
Aret said aghast. The Astartes smiled thinly. A chipped, rusting cleaver had found the gap beneath his shoulder plating, thrust with such force as to penetrate the ceramite and adamantium behind.
Yes. The mutant filth of the underdecks is always excited by the agitation of the warp. While my brothers scrape and bow to false gods, I honor the God Emperor through my deeds. Do not remove the blade, Acolyte,
he added, as Aret reached forwards.
Not yet. I need your assistance removing the armor plates. It is not a deep wound, but this body is his work, and it shall not be marred unnecessarily.
Diocles nodded, and Aret reached closer with trembling hands. He heard hissing as the Astartes released the sealant clamps, a short burst of pressurized air squirting upwards.
Stand, Acolyte. Even a portion of my armor will be heavy for you.
Aret did as he was told, placing his hands on the edges of the Astartes' shoulder plating. His fingers found the cold, black rim of the armor, bordering a crimson red. He lifted, wheezing as he struggled beneath the weight, the shoulder coming loose and almost clattering to the ground.
Do not drop it. It is sacred.
Knees buckling, Aret slowly lowered it down, his arms shaking violently as they threatened to give out entirely. He spoke, trying to distract himself from the exertion.
I thought I saw Sara here.
She is dead, Aret. Do you not remember?
Yes. Yes, I remember.
In his mind's eye, Aret saw Sara writhing on the bed. Her legs were slithering tentacles below the knee, pus oozing from octopus suckers, the mutation reaching for Aret. She was screaming, hacking at her diseased flesh with a meat cleaver. Blood spattered everywhere. The tentacles let her do it, even as she amputated them, always grasping for Aret, slithering, snaking.
Do you remember it in full?
Seized by some insane impulse, Aret reached forwards, hands snatching the tentacles that waved to him through the air. As the suckers tightened around his wrists, he pulled, wrenching the tentacles from Sara's body, feeling the tear of skin and the warm splashes of blood across his face. He was shouting something about the God Emperor, about Sara's soul, and she was screaming too, screaming that her soul might yet go to him, screaming that she might yet serve in the Emperor's immortal armies against the enemies of humankind.
Yes.
Sara found her martyrdom that day, Arret, and you helped her. Despite every effort of the warp, that was a blessed day. Remember that, Acolyte. Evil is but an opportunity for faith. Delight even as you cleanse it with prayer and blood.
The shoulder plate clanked noisily against the stone. Arret proceeded with the armor beneath.
Yet I saw her tonight.
There are no holy ghosts on this ship, Arret.
It was not holy, but I confess,
Confess.
I feel I am powerless. I feel that I achieve nothing, that I am a failure. Does the scripture not tell us to cleanse the traitor? Does it not say that tolerance is the greatest of evils?
It does.
I am a coward. I might even be a heretic.
Heretics can be forgiven in death.
And yet Saint Eli preaches that the only distinction between heresy and treachery is ignorance. Am I ignorant? I know my sins, and yet I do nothing.
Diocles sighed. It was a deep, rumbling sigh that shook through his entire body.
We must believe in redemption, Arret. We must.
With the final piece of shoulder armoring removed, Arret could see the black carapace beneath, bloodied and torn where the cleaver had buried into the Astartes' flesh. Now able to see the wound, Diocles turned his head, reaching towards the hilt of the weapon. Judging the angle carefully, the Astartes yanked it loose in one powerful tug. Blood leaked slowly from the wound, clotting swiftly.
Forgive me, Diocles. I am grateful for life.
I cannot forgive your sins. Only the Emperor has that power, and he knows that my sins are greater still.
I live, but I hide. I am surrounded by traitors and I do nothing.
You are blind to your growing courage.
Diocles flexed his wounded arm, placing his hand on Arret's shoulder.
When I first found you, you would not have acted to assist Sara in her martyrdom. You would not have dared speak to me of the warp's temptations. You would not have confronted your own failures so forthrightly. Have faith, Arret. You are approaching the moment of your martyrdom, I know it. Do you not remember what that martyrdom was to be?
Arret swallowed.
I was to be martyred against you.
And did I not vow that you would have your chance? Am I not here, awaiting your salvation? This candle that we keep, Acolyte. It is not only for this ship, but for our own souls. You see plainly the darkness about you, but only now do you start to see the darkness within. It is true, Arret. You face the moment of crisis soon. Saint Eli of Onyx 7, blessed as he is in holy martyrdom, he is not wrong. Ignorance is the heretic's only shield against treachery, and the scales are falling from your eyes. But when you truly, wholly see, Arret, there shall be your martyrdom. That shall be your opportunity for salvation. And I pray with both my hearts that you shall find it. That you shall find him in death.
But what if I fail? I have always been so afraid to die.
Then you shall be lost forever from his light, and I shall mourn my failure.
Diocles squeezed Arret's shoulder. The Astartes smiled, and for a moment Arret truly believed that everything would be okay.
But I have faith.
Aret examined the cleaver that Diocles had thrown to the ground. It was still stained with the Astartes' blood, the blade rusty and chipped. Its handle was encrusted with dirt and Emperor knows what else.
The weapon of a mutant and a traitor,
Diocles said. His eyes shone, his lips mouthing a silent prayer before he spoke again.
You have your own weapon, Aret.
Aret glanced down. He was holding his cheese knife. The acolyte marveled. He had no recollection of picking it up, no recollection of reaching down and grasping at its handle.
Ave Imperator,
he said. Diocles' smile was positively beatific.
Ave Imperator Sancte, brother.
Aret lunged with the knife, aiming for the wound already caused by the cleaver, aiming for the tear in the black carapace where his blunt blade might find purchase. His soul soared, or perhaps that was sheer adrenaline pumping through his blood, giving new life to his old limbs. He felt a sudden, immense blow to the side of his head, and then he was lying prone on the ground. Aret blinked. His vision was blurred, but he couldn't focus his eyes. He could see the knife. It had fallen from his grip, glinting in the candlelight beside Diocles' armored boot. Aret tried to stand, but he couldn't move his limbs. The side of his head felt wet. He blinked, trying to make sense of what had happened. Diocles had moved so quickly.
Your skull is fractured. It shall not be long now.
Aret tried to organize his mind, tried to reassert his thoughts. He couldn't move. The Astartes knelt beside him, chanting prayers in a deep, mellifluous voice. Aret frowned. It sounded like an angel, calling out to him from across an infinite darkness. He saw that darkness now, but he still heard the angel, calling to him, shepherding him. In the distance across those impossible leagues of endless darkness and horror, Aret saw a straining candlelight. Diocles offered a final prayer as Aret died. His power armor hissed as he rose to his feet. He looked down at the body, so frail, so fragile. The corpse lay at the base of the column, a stark, red stain marking where its skull had met the stone. A slow but steady stream of blood pooled about its head, its eyes wide, something like a smile on the acolyte's lips. The Astartes bowed his head and was alone.